Chapter 7. Working on the Stewart Ranch. I wasn't able to work hard and I couldn't ride bad horses, so I went to work on the Horseshoe Ranch doing odd jobs for a spell. The ranch was located near Cochrain, New Mexico. It was there I witnessed one of the most brutal killings I'd ever seen. A good many settlers were coming into the country east of the spread. Strife was going on between cattle and farmer, and outlaws were running rampant. I had to stay neutral due to my condition. There were three men named Spikes who moved from Lubbock County, Texas, and an old man named Sam Golson, whom I remember well. Golson had 2 or 3 son-in-laws named Nations and Lee. All were said to be man-killers. Golson was a dangerous man if crossed. There were some hard characters who hung around them. The Spike boys, Dick, John, and Fred, were accused of harboring Henry Hawkins and his men. They were stealing from everyone, and Hawkins had a reward on his head, dead or alive. Golson was running green cattle from Lubbock County and had gotten Fatty White and the Horn Ranch to come over and take his headquarters for a while at his place. They made things mighty hot for Hawkins, and suddenly Hawkins disappeared. They claimed to have followed him to the line of Old Mexico and won themselves a good reputation. 7 of them waylaid Spikes and gang. They shot and killed John and Richard Spikes on the spot. They got Fred, but his horse carried him away, and a Mexican hauled him to Hereford, where he stayed in a sanitarium for several months. White, Sam, and his boys, and some others were hid in a deep ravine near a fence that the Spike boys were working on and shot them down from the banks of the ravine. They were freed of all charges. One of the men who was in the Spikes' ambush was whipping a boy who was working with him one morning. He was on his horse and was hitting him with a double rope. The boy, barefooted in his shirt sleeves, walking. George Nations was riding beside him. Charlie Simpson, a man I had just met, happened along to the Nations beating the boy. Instead of killing Nations, Simpson pulled his gun and told him not to hit the boy again. Nation skulked away like a coyote, but afterwards he caught Simpson off guard and killed him. I was sitting on the ground near Simpson when all this happened. We were having our dinner. Simpson did not notice Nations and his bunch as they rode up. Nations drew his pistol and without warning shot Simpson 6 times. The first shot that hit him knocked him over and paralyzed his right arm, as it struck the shoulder. It was the worst gunfight I ever saw take place for me to have to sit and do nothing. It happened so fast, and one had a chance to do anything. I carried Charlie Simpson back to Tucumcari with me. Not long after that, I got a letter from one of the Pearlie sisters telling me that Pearlie was dead. She had gone with her father to Vernon, Texas, to have an operation on her jaw, and there she had died for some reason. Pearlie had asked her to write me. I was still not well, but with Pearlie gone, I had an uncontrollable urge to move on. The doctor who tended my wounds had told me to go to Arizona, and that the climate would be good for my lungs. I sent my dad some money, but I didn't mention any of the things that happened to me or what I had seen, and then I headed to Douglas, Arizona. I did not crowd my horses, as I was not too strong and in no hurry. I felt rather odd as I rode along the trails. I was a young man, but my life had already been crowded with adventure. On the trail I met a man who stopped me to pass the time of day. He wanted to find out how far it was back to the trail I had traveled to get water and grass for his horse. He camped that night with me, and we talked for a long time. He told me that he had been a small cattleman in that country and had been stolen out by big outfits. He had lost his wife, so he sold his place and was headed back to Whitesboro, Grayson County, Texas, to spend the remainder of his time. It was he who told me about Mr. Stewart, who needed someone to help his ranch. He told me how to get to the Stewart Ranch and advised me not to carry too much money on me. He warned me not to go through any towns or ask the way to the ranch. 3 days after I left the man, I rode into Stewart Ranch, carrying a note from the man. I was met by a boy about 12. He asked me if I knew his dad. I told him I didn't, but that I'd rather have this letter from a neighbor of theirs. He looked at the note and grinned. He said they had always called him Uncle Bill, and he invited me into the house, but I told him I would wait outside until his dad got home. There were 5 children. The mother had died about 6 months prior to my coming. When Mr. Stewart came home, he took me into the house and began asking questions about my horses. I explained to him I needed work but couldn't do any heavy work just yet. They told me that the Hash Knife outfit wanted his land for a house. I've known the Hash Knife outfits all my lives. Their headquarters ranch was in the Baylor County, Texas, when I was a kid, where the town of Seymour now stands. I'd known some of the men who worked for them. Next morning he looked over my horses and asked if either of them had ever been on a racetrack. I told him that both of them had, but the older horse was beat at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and the other had been run only a few times and hadn't been beat yet. He wanted me to stay at the ranch a month or so to put the horses in shape to run. He seemed very eager to get started on training my horses. Sam Hilliard had cleaned out a couple of years back, and he wanted to get even. He told me that if I had any money to use, he could get me 5-1, maybe more if the horse was fast enough to beat Hilliard's black horse. We set to work putting the blue roan in shape. When he tried him out, Mr. Stewart was the happiest man I've ever seen. No one had seen me around, so we started planning a match without arousing suspicion. I wanted to help Mr. Stewart get back some of what he had lost if I could. One evening I arrived in Bisbee from the east and tied my horse in a hitch rack and went into the barber shop. When I came out, there was a crowd of men looking over my horse. Some of them even tried to buy it. They asked me if the Blue had ever been on a racetrack. One man wanted to take my horse and try it. I said no. Sam Hilliard introduced himself and wanted to know how long it would take me to train a horse for a race. I told him 3 weeks and that I would have to see the other horse first. Sam had his jockey bring his horse to him. I asked how much the odds would give, and he told me none. He wanted to know how much forfeit I would put up. We went to the bank and got a forfeit contract drawn up. If either of us should fail to appear or fail to run, the other would get the 500 we put up. When I got back to the ranch, Mr. Stewart was very happy about the deal. He said, "I have 2 good locks, Byrd, to put on the stable doors and make sure they're locked day and night. Sleep with that horse, or you will lose him around here." The day before the race, Mr. Stewart went to town. He told me when he returned that Mr. Hilliard seemed concerned about my disappearance. He had even had some men out looking for me. He decided I wouldn't show. The race was at 11. At 10, I was loping the Blue on the track. The crowd had already gathered. Mr. Stewart was calling every bet he could. He passed by me and whispered, "Keep a stiff upper lip. Things are fine." He told me to leave town as soon as the race was over, and I would get my share of the money. Hilliard and I went back to the bank and got our forfeit money, and he bet me 3-1 that his horse would beat mine. We were running a half-mile, and my spirits were running a little higher than when I put up the money. I did not say much, though, and I had no intention of riding my horse in the race. I had a scheme. Hilliard asked me where I'd been. I told him the hill was for my health, and I told him I had found it cheaper to live that way. He said, "I tried to find you. You must be in a hole to crawl in." When we got back to the racetrack, I pulled off my saddle and laid on the ground. I put on my surgical and was standing by my horse when a young man rode up and said, "Hey, I have $25 that says your crow bait can't beat that black." He told me his name was Joe Allen. We talked for a bit, and I found he was from Callahan County, Texas. His mother was a widow, and he had one sister younger. "You put your money where your mouth is, boy, and you got a bet." He put it up, and so did I. Several others then called small bets. 11 o'clock came, and I held the little roan back by a neck's length of the black, so there would be no argument that I had got the start on him. I hooked my bridle over the hook of the cringle and slid off and said, "Go get him, boy." The little fellow was in the lead by 3 jumps and kept the lead until they went under the wire at the half-mile post and circled, then came back to me and got his sugar. I went to my saddle and gave the horse his sugar. I got money and told him we could eat for a long time now. I headed next to the livery stable, but passed it by and rode towards the mountains for a while, circled the town, and headed for my camp of the night before there were Mr. Stewart's place. I put my horse in his stable and ate the breakfast the girls had prepared for me, and told the kids all about what had happened at the race. It was 6 the next morning when Mr. Stewart got home with the news he had won enough money to save his ranch. He could now buy more cattle and clothes the children badly needed. That night, Mr. Stewart asked me to go in with him as a partner. I told him I didn't want to be tied to one place. I sang a few old cowboy songs to the children before their bedtime. As I sang parts of California Joe, I began to feel an itch in my heels. sun was slowly sinking when my wife and I came riding through the valley, the teardrops in her eyes. 1 year ago, Joe, I see the mossy grave. We laid him beneath the daisies, my uncle true and brave. And comrades, every springtime is sure to find me there, as something in that valley is always fresh and fair. Our lives newly kindled while sitting by the stream, where two hearts were united in love's sweet happy dream. I gained back the weight I lost, and my lung was healed. I sent more money to the folks, and I heard that in town some of the people were mad because I had run my horse without a rider. Some of the men had bet all they had. Hilliard was the heaviest loser. He was a bachelor and had plenty.